Sometimes the best laid plans just never work out. So let's get this started one more time. Welcome back to the mcgolfshop. Jim McCleary, most awarded certified clubmaker, club fitter. And if you would, swing and hit that bell down below, and that way you get more of these videos when they drop. And if you would, follow me on the other social platforms like Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and it's IAMMCGOLF or McGolf Custom Clubs. And that way you see more of what's going on in the shop. Alrighty, so what have I been trying to do? You guys, I've shown you in a couple of videos where I've become a heads-only Mizuno dealer, and I've wanted to do this comparison for quite some time, and I have done it. It's just getting this doggone video to go in the direction or in the series that I need it to go in order for it to make sense. So here's the deal. Mizuno has an MP line and they have a JPX line. All right, so the MP line is the blade, the MCC4, and the HMB, the hot metal blade. All the MP lines, right? They're all MP20s. All right, very good player, very good player, very good player. Although this one's way more forgiving. Then they have the JPX line, which starts with the JPX Tour. All right, the JPX Tour is exactly what they see on the Tour, a one-piece forged blade, and it is basically what Mr. Voshall will call a MP and JPX clothing. Now, just starting from there, what I'm going to do is, I had a discussion with Mr. Voshall. His name's Chris Voshall. He's head of engineering of this, and he and I talked for 2 hours on it, but you're getting the last bit of it, and we're talking about the JPX line. So let's hear what he has to say. So I'm falling on my sword, guys and gals. Chris and I talked for about an hour. I took a whole hour of this man's time and didn't record the first freaking word. However, I did learn a lot. We did learn a lot about the Mizuno product. We learned a lot about the company itself, which makes me more than happy that I'm on board. So this is perfect. So what we're going to do really is, and we've talked about it, we had kind of a warm-up anyway, is the JPX line, right? And the MP, the Mizuno Pro, is certainly for the guy that is the extraordinarily good player. But with the combo sets, you could get into the the lower handicap spots, right? That's what we're aiming at with those. The HMB, the hot metal blade, or whatever we want to call it, right, is in that player's distance category, which could also be we'll combo set it into that, and we will certainly be testing some of that. I'm gonna have to bring in a right-handed friend and have him hit just so everybody can see it. But I think in the largest terms that the JPX line, there are 4 irons in the JPX line that will probably, other than that HMB, will probably appeal to the largest, what we'll call it, fraction of the golfers that certainly in the U.S., but certainly around. And we'll start, I got to get you the right ones here. we start with the JPX Tour.
Yep.
And then the JPX Forge. And if you see, they don't look alike, but by golly, they're very close to one another.
Yeah, so with these, we wanted to make sure, as you talked about just a minute ago, we want to be able to combo sets and be able to mix and match so that even though we have 4 different sets within the JPX line, you could make a number of different sets depending on what you want out of your performance of each club. So looking right now, we're at the 919 Tour and 919 Forged. These are the 2 Forge models within the JPX line. The Tour is really the one that is designed for the lower handicap. It is, if you want to call it the MP and JPX clothing. It's a traditional one-piece grain flow forge HD 1025 pure select mild carbon steel head. It's a lot of words just to basically say there's not a ton of technology behind, generating higher ball speeds or anything, but this is designed for feel. The forging, the HD forging, the material, it's going to feel ultra soft. If you look at it from behind, though, that's a great view right there where you can see that on the sole side and on the toe side, we moved a lot of mass away from the heel. The idea being that the hosel is a very heavy part of the golf club. So traditionally, a club like that, the center of gravity is going to sit towards the heel. But by removing a lot of mass out of the heel side and pushing it towards the toe, we're able to neutralize that sweet spot, move it towards the center of the score lines. That's going to give you more consistent ball flights, but also it's going to increase the overall moment because that center of gravity is moving away from that heavy part. So the MOI is going to be larger. You're going to get more consistent ball speeds. So for a player's club that's still relatively small, it's shockingly forgiving for that type of golf club, but it is still for the lower handicap. This one's one that's played immensely out on tour. It's really our most popular tour club right now, including one of the top players in the world who's won a bunch of majors over the last couple of years. And then if you want to go a step farther in terms of forgiveness, there's the JPX 919 forged. This one still forged. It's got a great feel, but it's forged from a different material. It's forged from what we call a 1025 boron. The boron's a little bit stronger, which allows us to go thinner. And from this angle, you can actually see a little slot right behind the face. We actually went in and milled this from the sole side. We removed material parallel to the face all the way the width of the score lines and went parallel there. Because we're using that boron material, we're able to go very thin. So we're able to get a higher COR, even though this is a forging. And whenever you remove material, you're also saving mass. So that extra mass we can place further deep in the club. So it is a very low sweet spot golf club as well. And you can see, again, similar to on the tour, a lot of mass out on the toe side. So the center of gravity is more deep and toe side than a traditional, forged golf club like that.
Now, are we finding that the loft, this is more of your traditional lofts?
Correct.
Is the forged a little stronger, or is it close to the same?
It is. So if we're talking in terms of like 7-irons, the most common fitting club, you'll look at the tour is going to be at a 34 degree. The forge is going to be at a 32 degree. And then when we get to like our hot metals and stuff like that, those will live at 30 degrees. So the good thing is it's a little bit stronger. The forge is that perfect combination of forgiveness and feel. But if you want to do a combo set, the reason we placed them 2 degrees apart is we believe if you want to combo them, split the difference, just match them right there. That way you don't have a big jump in terms of loft going from one to the other. If you were to keep your tour, at its standard loft and then go all the way to a forge at its standard loft, you would get too big a jump there. So we encourage the fitter to actually bridge those lofts.
The other part that I truly like when I see, I make a big statement every time, I don't like edges.
Right.
And I like radiuses, and that's the other thing that you guys do in spades is that we have radiuses.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as we were talking earlier, where I wasn't recording about turf, about turf interaction, and I believe that a radius sole really just helps you, get through the turf a little bit easier, particularly in taller irons, so you don't lay the sod over up on that. And then when you get into the wider sole and the bigger stuff, that because of the undulations of all where you can play, that it just helps you play, just helps you get through the ball better.
I totally agree. I mean, you talk about, we talked a little bit earlier about in terms of different manufacturing processes, in terms of, what computer milling is done, what computer design is done. A lot of, if you look at designing something on a computer versus designing something old school, where it was very artisanal, it was very craftsman, you went from very organic shapes to, if you design something in the 3D world, it's very easy for it to lose that organicness of nature of shape by hard dimensioning everything. So we work very, very heavily in terms of trying to take a very precisely engineered part, but at the same time bring that organic shape to it. Lots of soft radiuses, lots of rolling from one shape to another. On the MP line, on the tour line, you'll see a ton of work with craftsmen on the post-processing before we go into mass production. You're holding right now the 919 hot metal, and that golf club is a very precisely engineered club, but at the same time, you can see soft edges everywhere. Those soft edges are because the last thing you want is something that catches. Golf is a game that's played on turf. It's not played off a mat. It's not played off very, perfectly flat lies. You need radii everywhere. You need rounding. You need grinding. You need subtle variations in terms of the actual like elevation of things. So we design our soles very, very much in the 3D world, where we call out multiple different versions of what the radius is at any given point, not only in the toe heel direction, but also in the front back direction.
So from a more of a fitter, nerdy, geeky kind of guy that I am, when you talk about radiuses, it's just not like front to back center. The center of the height of the radius is right in the middle. That actually moves per the club, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I can just speak very closely to the actual engineer side of it, because when we define a sole, you know, the layman may think it's just one radius that just goes all the way from the toe to heel. We define bounce in at least 9 different places, depending on which sole it is. So we define a bounce and a radius in the center, at the toe plane, at the heel plane, on the front edge, the center, and the trailing edge. So those 3 by 3, we basically are defining 9 different points and then organically smoothing those between there. So actually, if you were to take a sole bounce measurement at the actual geometric center of the sole, it actually is going to be a slightly different measurement than you get at the toe side, at the heel side. You'd get a different measurement at the front edge than you would at the trailing edge. So we very much take seriously how that sole interacts and how we design it to make sure it's very precisely engineered bounce measurements all across it.
And not only going this way, but
that way.
That way too. That's the one that's really lost on a lot of people, is this.
You're exactly right. If you have the same bounce on the toe as you do on the heel, then when you get a lie that's a little bit suspect, you're going to have a leading edge on the heel that sits higher, or leading edge on the toe that sits higher. We want to make sure that the actual bounce is going to make it so that it's most likely to utilize the proper amount of the sole depending on the lie. So we call out a number of different things and design all of those into the specs. We're going to deliver you a spec, like, we deliver a bounce measurement on all of our specs, and traditionally that's the center measurement, but we do work on 9 different spots.
So when we're talking about soles with the hot metal line here, you guys kind of jumped out of the traditional Mizuno box.
We did. So it's a much thicker sole than you'd expect from a Mizuno. Granted, we went and beveled off the trailing edge very aggressively, so it won't drag through the turf. We still want to enter and exit cleanly, still have a good amount of what we call camber, that radius from the front to back. So we want to make sure it's got a good amount of camber. It is thicker because we want to bring that center of gravity deep. We're saving so much mass by going so thin on the face with the chromoly material that we wanted to be able to utilize that weight savings to pull the center of gravity as far back as possible. So the trailing edge is far back. You can picture that stability frame where that run bird is stamped on the back. It is a good ways back from the face that's going to allow you to get great launch on it. That great launch allows us to go a little bit stronger on the loft. So this is going to live at about a 30-degree 7-iron, but because the center of gravity is so deep, this will actually launch very similar to like a 34-degree tour. So it's very much playing lots of little different games in terms of how you weight things to make sure you get the performance how you want it.
And another one is the hot metal, or the hot metal and the hot metal pro. Basically, the differences between it is just the offset, right?
It's the offset, the sole width to a lesser extent. The pro's a little bit smaller, but it's really just a head size thing. Yeah, the black sole number is the pro, the white sole number is the standard. If you look at us compared to some of our competitors who do, a pro model or a better players version of their game improvement club, ours are priced the same because we put the same technologies into all of them. Essentially, it's a spec change between the pro and the tour. So the pro is a little bit less offset. It's a little bit thinner top line, a little bit smaller from heel to toe, but it's the exact same material, the exact same process, the exact same design philosophy going into it.
And I like the fact that you guys took the accent, you have it, the direct, where you most likely will contact the turf, and then you kind of highlight it out there. It kind of gives
Mhm.
it doesn't give it that big wide feel. It kind of makes it feel a little smaller. I mean, it's a good cosmetic added
Mhm.
to the design of the club. Does very,
It's a
very
little
well.
it's a little bit of a trick you can play in terms of making it visually feel a little bit more compact by beveling that trailing edge, then putting that mirror finish. It almost makes it a different part. So you're right. The sole overall is pretty wide for a deep center gravity, but it doesn't play wide, and we didn't want to look wide.
Right. So I like now for the guys, everybody knows that I'm a lefty, and so there are some lefty stuff available. Not everything, which I never ever once believed that, it's not a good business decision at all. However, the left-handed, there is the 919 forged and the
Hmm.
919 hot metal
Correct.
is what's available in lefty, and I've hit them both, and yeah. I mean, I got to show you. It's funny because, when we talk about fittings, that the smash factor or the quality of hit, we don't lose that in irons. In fact, it becomes just as important in irons because it tells you whether you're heeling or towing or you're not
Hmm.
getting the middle, of which you don't get the best performance. And I did some testing with that, and gravy, that forged model, it just feels wonderful. And honestly, because I think it was because we talked about the turf interaction, that I
Hmm.
was hitting maybe the hot metal just a tad heavy or whatever, but there was a difference, and they were almost going the same distance, which is crazy stupid.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
impressive. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, that just shows you how poorly I was hitting one and how good I was hitting the other. It wasn't that it wasn't any iron; it was the goober at the end of the other end of the stick. So, but that the JPX line, right? You got 4 selections. You're going to have, everybody under the sun basically is going to be able to do it. If you've got guys that are on the tour making millions of dollars with crazy skills like they've got, and they choose to hit something that looks like that, I mean, right there, right?
absolutely.
And you could combo set up, right? Everybody
Hmm.
thinks about combo setting down, but when you guys start out with the tour, right? And you guys start out the tour, there's nothing saying you couldn't go up, and not even saying that you couldn't go up a little higher in the pro model
You're
if you wanted to hit something easier, like a 2-iron or whatever.
You're exactly right. All 4 of those models are in play on the PGA Tour right now in one form or another. You look at the Tour, and of course, it's played on on the widest variety of clubs. You'll get pitching wedges up to 4 irons in play on Tour. You see a lot of the JPX 919 Forge in the 4, 5, 6 iron, and we actually have a couple of the Hot Metal Pros in play in what are 2, 3, 4 irons for players. They might not be stamped 2, 3, 4 iron, but that's what they're playing them as, just because that's how the lofts work out. So I'll tell kind of a funny story of if you guys watched the Tour Championship last year, there was a player who, I can't necessarily name a name, but there was a player who hit a shot into 18 and it carried farther than he thought it was going to. He gave his caddy a very little, he gave it one of those looks, and he was trying to figure out what happened. And that's because he was hitting a hot metal that actually had the different number stamped on the sole, because the way the lofts work, he plays basically a 4-iron as his 3 and a 5-iron as his 4. So it shifted one. So he actually pulled the wrong club,
Oh no.
flushed it, and it could have cost him a lot of money. But it's funny, but that just goes to the point of we've got players playing all of these levels of golf clubs on tour.
And that's the thing. It just goes to show you that the availability of that, right? That the people, not every swing is the same on tour. Not every person's feel is the same on tour. Not everybody's needs are the same on tour. And
Right.
and geez, oh Pete, and they represent the 1% of all of golf on the planet, or even
Right.
less than 1%. Imagine all the different needs and wants of all the different people that are out there, and you
Yeah,
can
it's
get a
crazy.
lot of that. I mean, that's spectacularly cool.
All right, now coming back, we talked about it. So you had the Tour, you have the forged, again, another forged product. You notice how there's a lot of weight on the toe area, and that's to prevent from turning it over. Then we get into the hot metal side, and this is the Hot Metal Pro, and this is the hot metal itself. All right, and basically, if you look at them, the Pro has less offset than the regular one. And that's a lot of the difference right there. Now, loft progressions are pretty much going to be in the same category. If we just use the 6-iron as an example, the MP20 blade is going to be 30, which is very, very, very well weak in comparison. However, it's for that better player. The JPX Tour is going to be the weakest loft, the Forge the next, and the Pro is going to be the same. And then the most strongest of the clan is the JPX Hot Metal, and that's at 26. So you have a 4-degree span from the lowest to the highest, okay? Now, for lefties, they have wisely not done them all, but we get to hit the blade. We get to hit the forged product, the JPX Forged, and then we get to hit the Hot Metal. So this is going to be a wonderful experiment. This is going to be a wonderful experiment to show you the differences in fitting as well as in what does loft do. All right, we're going to see really quite a bit of difference in what quality of hit means and what loft does when it does it with a club. So we're going to use the same exact shaft in all three of the models just to show you what it can and cannot do. So let's go ahead and see what we found.
Here we are in the tale of 3 clubs, the 20, the Forged, and the Hot Metal. You can see there's quite the discrepancy in distances between them. That really has to do with the loft, because you can see where my smash factor is very, very, very close. Now what we're going to be seeing here is the flights, and as you can tell, you know, the striking thing was that with the blade, that when you miss, you were missing distance, not necessarily left to right. Now you can see in my very last shot, I really got into a good one, but that was a one-in-a-lifetime kind of shot. The rest of them were just as the average would suggest, into the mid-170s with the 6-iron. And when we get into the JPX Forged, it's a little bit stronger by 2 degrees, a little more forgiving, or significantly more forgiving, and hence it went a little bit further on the average, right? And what you're seeing there is pretty much what I'm doing on the average in the mid-180s. And then we get into the Hot Metal, and as you can tell, that last one, I blasted that last one into the 206, 208 range. However, again, that's a big one. And what we were really looking at was the, you know, on the average in the 190 category. But all in all, they all felt pretty doggone good, and I was pretty happy with them. Now what you see here is their landing area, and we see that there's the MP20, there's the Forged, and there is the Hot Metal. Again, for a 6-iron, I'm going to say for me that's a pretty doggone good pattern, but you know, we can always work on something else going forward.
Okay, so now we've seen all that stuff. When it comes to, me hitting them, right? I consider myself an average golfer, maybe just slightly better, but not much more. And, did I hit these? Yeah, I hit them. Did I hit them very far? No, because they're the weakest of the clan. Now, who would these be for? Certainly a very, very solid ball striker, right? A very solid one, and one that's generating club head speed, because, I was jumping up into the 90s, high 90s, in order to make this thing go. And as you saw on there, that I made one go very far and the rest of them were just right there. Now, what was really surprising was the dispersion was not nearly as far off as I thought it would be. What really was penal is if you're off just even the slightest bit, then you're going to be short. And if you're not an elite or very, very good ball striker, these will be penal. Now, will you learn to do that? That's purely up to you. Now, the JPX Forged is the next leap. So from a left-handed point of view, these guys really picked out some really good left-handed product, because you have the MP20, the MMC, were the 2 that you can combo set, and those are in the very good ones. Now they also have the HMB MP20, and that's a very forgiving one. I would like to see that one left-handed one day, if they ever get to that particular point, because that was a heck of a club, and I believe it's going to be a very good club for a lot of people. Now, getting into the JPX line, the Tour and the Forged are for really good ball strikers as well. very thin in the sole, very thin in the top, very little offset, and not as strong lofted. So you already have that in the MP. Why do that again? So here we go with the forged, which is what I would become the beginning of their HD forging process, where you see starting to see cuts in the bottom in the cavity. You see a little more heel weight, longer blades, and stuff like that. And initially, I really struggled with this particular club, although I thought this one would be the one I could hit the best. And I struggled with it, and I think it was because after seeing the MP20, that this looked extraordinarily long, although it may not be so much, but it just looked really long. And now I went back to it a second and third time in order to see if I could make friends with it. And I did. It hit very well. So who would this be for? I would say this was for the medium good ball striker, and the guy that's not taking a massive divot but can take divots, because if you see, it's got what I would call a medium sole. It has the radius. It has very little offset. So again, if in most of these cases, if you're a guy that's fading the ball just because you can't get the club closed, this is not going to work for you. Now, can you improve? Sure. But right off the bat, if you're looking for improvement, this is not the way to go. Now, the last one, the hot metal, which would probably be one of their more favored clubs. Why is that? Because it's the strongest club in the bag, or the strongest club in the set. Now, distance sells, all right? That's just what it comes down to. Distance sells, and this will hit the ball the furthest because it is also the strongest lofted. Now, this one will also fit the largest category of golfers in that most are average, the average golfer, right? The one under the bell curve, and does that. It has a hint of offset, what I would call a medium-low offset, which could be just about enough. And it has a larger sole so that those guys that are chopping to be chopping, that they get through it. But it's not so wide that it's going to impact you going forward. Has a fairly long blade so that it is very forgiving, and it has a very hot face, as you saw in the distances. So, just about anybody could use that one, where a medium guy could do that, and then the very good ball striker in the MP20s. Now, the cool part about the Mizuno setup is they're all made for combo setting, as sets. So what does that mean? That means that, let's say you wanted to have the hot metal and do a 4-5-6 or a 3-4-5, and then go into the forge category after that, down into the pitching wedge and into the gap wedge for that matter. They have a JPX gap wedge, and you could have that and have a combo set. So you could have this freedom at the top end of the set and this precision at the bottom end of the set, and that strikes through. And that's for me being the lefty. Now, for you being the righty, you could do that forged club at the top end if you're a better ball striker, and then go into the pro model, right? You go into the pro model that way. Or the MMC and the cavity. There's just so many things that you could do for combo setting. It's just crazy. So you don't think that you just have to be stuck with one particular set altogether. That there are different combinations, and you don't even have to have one. You could have the HMB being almost a driving iron kind of thing, and then get into it. So there's those things. So again, something to look at. Mizuno's hitting it out of the park again in the iron category. Thank you to Chris Voshall for spending that time for these telling us how they're doing, and we hope to talk to him some more again going forward. And let's see your scores go low.